Leo Martinez was a rising star, scoring goals on the pitch and winning hearts by the thousands. But behind the cheers and flashing cameras, he was hiding a deadly secret. While fans celebrated his talent, Leo was secretly moving bricks, not of soccer, but of cocaine, building a hidden empire that would shatter his dreams and drag him into a world of betrayal, crime, and millions in cash. This is the story of how a promising football career became a cover for a dangerous underground operation, and how one man's double life changed everything. In a quiet town where football was more than just a game, it was a way of life. A young boy named Leo first kicked a ball that would change everything. From the dusty streets to the crowded local fields, his talent was obvious from the very beginning. Unlike most kids, Leo had a natural gift. He moved with a speed and grace that made defenders stumble and spectators hold their breath. As he grew, so did his reputation. Coaches, teammates, and even rivals knew this boy was destined for something bigger. Local matches were packed whenever Leo played, and whispers started to spread beyond the town. Scouts from bigger clubs came to watch him, curious about this rising star who seemed to carry the hopes of an entire community on his shoulders. At first, everything about Leo's life seemed simple and pure. Football was his dream, and his escape. Every goal he scored was a step closer to a better future, one where he could leave behind the struggles of his upbringing. His family, though proud, lived modest. Football wasn't just a passion, it was a chance to rise out of hardship. The town believed in him, and Leo carried that faith like a shield. But beneath the surface of cheers and celebrations, there were shadows growing, shadows that no one could see yet. The first cracks in this perfect story began to appear quietly. As Leo's name grew, so did the interest of people outside the world of sport. Powerful figures who operated in the city's darker corners started watching him, recognizing an opportunity. To them, Leo was more than just a talented player. His rising fame made him the perfect cover for a secret that could bring them millions. At first, it was small favors, almost harmless tasks that went unnoticed. But what started as a way to earn extra money on the side soon pulled Leo into a world far removed from the football pitch. Leo's life became a dangerous balancing act. On the field, he was a star, focused, determined, and admired. Off the field, he was part of something hidden and illegal, moving goods that no one dared to speak about. He hid his new role carefully, knowing that exposure would ruin everything he had worked for. The duality of his existence created a silent tension. Each game was played with the weight of secrets he carried, each goal scored under the watchful eyes of people who wanted more than just his talent. Despite this, Leo's performance on the pitch never faltered. If anything, his hunger to succeed only grew stronger. The fans celebrated his victories, unaware of the risks he was taking behind the scenes. His personal life became increasingly isolated. Friends and family noticed changes but couldn't pinpoint what was wrong. The money he suddenly had access to raised questions, but Leo had answers rehearsed well enough to keep suspicion at bay. The pressure mounted silently. As Leo scored more goals and won more matches, the demands from his secret associates grew louder. His football career, once a symbol of hope, began to feel like a mask. Behind the roar of the crowds and the flash of cameras was a life trapped in fear and uncertainty. Each step forward on the field was shadowed by the danger lurking just beyond the stadium wall. Leo's dream of glory was still alive, but it was now tied to a dark and deadly secret, one that threatened not just his future, but his very life. As Leo's football career gained momentum, the line between his two worlds began to blur. The initial favors he did for the city's underground figures seemed harmless at first, carrying small packages from one place to another, never asking questions, just following instructions. It was easy money and at the time, seemed like a simple way to support his family without relying solely on his uncertain future in football. But what started as a small side hustle soon pulled him deeper into a web he couldn't escape. The people who approached Leo were not ordinary criminals. They were part of a sophisticated network running a lucrative cocaine import business. They recognized that Leo's status as a promising football star made him the perfect cover. No one suspected that a young athlete, who trained hard and lived in the public eye, was also involved in something so dangerous and illegal. His fame was his shield, and he used it to move shipments without drawing attention. At first, the packages were small, few grams here and there, easy to hide inside sports bags or sneakers. Leo's trustworthiness and ability to travel unnoticed made him an ideal courier. He made runs between cities, sometimes even internationally, without raising suspicion. The thrill of balancing his two lives gave him a dangerous rush. Every time he returned from a trip, it felt like winning a secret game no one else knew about. But the risks grew steadily. The stakes were no longer just about scoring goals or impressing coaches. Now they were about staying alive and keeping everything hidden. As months passed, Leo's role evolved. What began as simple deliveries escalated to transporting larger quantities, actual bricks of cocaine, packed tightly and wrapped to avoid detection. The people he worked for began trusting him more, giving him access to bigger parts of their operation. His responsibilities grew, and so did the pressure. Every trip became more nerve-wracking, every encounter with authorities a potential disaster. Leo's double life was exhausting. He trained hard during the day, pushing his body to the limit, and at night, he met with dealers and smugglers, negotiating deals or overseeing shipments. The adrenaline of football games, mixed with the tension of illegal business, created a dangerous cocktail. He was constantly looking over his shoulder, aware that a single mistake could ruin everything he had worked for. Despite the fear, Leo found a strange sense of control in this risky world. The drug business was ruthless, but it also promised wealth and power he had never dreamed. Football alone wouldn't bring the money or security his family needed. This underground empire was his secret source of millions, fueling a lifestyle that seemed impossible just a year earlier. He bought flashy cars, expensive clothes, and even moved into a luxury apartment, all while maintaining his image as the hometown hero. Yet the more involved Leo became, the more isolated he felt. The people in his life began to drift away, teammates, friends, even family members. They sensed something was wrong but couldn't put their finger on it. Leo's constant secrecy and sudden wealth created a distance he could not bridge. Every conversation felt like a test, every question a threat. Trust became a luxury he couldn't afford. Behind the scenes, tensions were rising. Rival factions within the drug network watched Leo closely. Some saw him as a valuable asset. Others viewed him as a dangerous liability. The football star who once dreamed of glory now found himself caught in a deadly game far beyond the stadium line. The risk of betrayal and violence grew with each shipment he moved. Leo's future was no longer about winning trophies but about surviving long enough to keep his secrets safe. Leo's descent into the world of drug trafficking didn't happen overnight. What began with small packets soon escalated into something far more dangerous, transporting large bricks of cocaine, each worth millions on the street. These weren't the discreet, easy-to-hide bundles he once carried. Now the shipments were bulkier, riskier, and required far greater trust. Leo had become a key player in a sprawling criminal operation that stretched across borders and involved people willing to kill to protect their empire. The increase in volume brought a new level of danger. Larger shipments meant more visibility and higher stakes. Smuggling drugs was no longer a simple task he could slip through unnoticed. Every move had to be calculated, every contact carefully chosen. Leo's football career still provided a perfect cover. Traveling for matches and training camps gave him plausible reasons to cross cities and countries. But behind the scenes he was no longer just a courier. He was managing logistics, coordinating pickups, and sometimes even negotiating terms with suppliers and buyers. Money flowed in faster than Leo could imagine. The piles of cash stacked up in secret accounts and safe houses far beyond his modest beginnings. With every brick moved, the empire expanded and Leo's role grew more crucial. It wasn't just about making quick trips anymore. He was becoming a trusted insider in a dangerous game where mistakes meant death, and mistakes happened. Rival gangs tried to muscle in, law enforcement intensified surveillance, and internal betrayals lurked in the shadows. The contrast between Leo's two worlds became more stark. On the pitch he was still the rising star, agile, focused, admired by fans and teammates alike. Off the pitch he was entwined in a ruthless underworld that demanded secrecy, loyalty and silence. The adrenaline from scoring goals was nothing compared to the fear that gripped him when shipments went missing or deals soured. Each successful run brought relief but also reminded him how close he was to losing everything. Despite the danger, Leo was seduced by the lifestyle the drug empire funded. His sudden wealth allowed him to buy things he never thought possible: luxury cars, designer clothes, and a high-end apartment in the city's most exclusive neighborhood. To outsiders he looked like a young man living the dream, but behind closed doors he was a prisoner to the very success he'd created. The fear of being caught, the constant pressure to deliver, and the paranoia of betrayal consumed him. Trust became a scarce commodity, and loneliness his only companion. The criminal network surrounding Leo was ruthless, alliances shifted frequently, and power struggles were common. The men Leo worked for weren't just businessmen, they were hardened criminals who had built their empire on violence and intimidation. Leo had to learn to navigate this treacherous world quickly, understanding that one wrong move could end in a bloody confrontation or a prison cell. The stakes were no longer about trophies or fame, they were about survival. Law enforcement agencies were closing in, their investigations growing deeper. Unknown to Leo, wiretaps and undercover operations had started to unravel the network he had become a part of. His football career made him a tempting target for the media, who were beginning to sniff out the connections between the sport and the drug trade. Leo's carefully constructed life was on the verge of collapse, though he still believed he could outrun the consequence. Every goal Leo scored on the field became a silent countdown. The higher he climbed, the harder the fall would be. His journey from local matches to international fame was now shadowed by the dangerous empire of cocaine he helped build. A secret life where the thrill of the game masked a deadly, underground world that threatened to destroy him. The money came fast and in piles. Suddenly, Leo was living a life that most people could only dream of. The luxury cars parked in front of his apartment, the expensive clothes he wore to matches, the private dinners and exclusive parties, it all screamed success. But beneath the surface of this newfound wealth, a dangerous tension was building. The cocaine empire he helped run was not just a business, it was a battlefield filled with greed, paranoia and violence. Leo tried to enjoy his riches, but the cost was higher than anyone could see. Every new purchase, every flashy display of wealth, was a reminder of how far he had strayed from the boy who played football for love. He knew the money came from illegal activities, and that knowledge aided him, but the temptation was hard to resist. The drug network offered him something football couldn't: power and control. Suddenly, Leo was no longer just a player on the field, but a player in a deadly game where the rules were brutal and unforgiving. As his fortune grew, so did the eyes watching him. Law enforcement agencies were tightening their grip on the city's drug trade, and Leo was becoming a target. The very fame that had protected him now put him in the spotlight. His name began to appear quietly in police reports and surveillance notes. Investigators knew there was a connection between the young football star and the rising drug empire, but proof was still out of reach. The tension between the public hero and the secret criminal was growing stronger every day. Rival gangs in the drug world were also watching closely. Some wanted to recruit Leo to their side, seeing his influence and connections as valuable assets. Others saw him as a threat, someone who had risen too fast, and who needed to be taken down. The line between friend and enemy blurred quickly. Every meeting Leo attended was laced with suspicion. One wrong move could spark a violent confrontation. Violence wasn't just a possibility, it was an expectation. Despite the danger, Leo's performance on the field didn't falter. He continued to score goals, win matches and earn praise from coaches and fans alike, but inside, he was struggling. The pressure of his double life was overwhelming. Balancing training, games, and his secret dealings left him exhausted and tense. His body carried the strain of both worlds, and his mind was always alert for threats. The joy of football was slowly being replaced by fear and anxiety. Leo's personal relationships suffered the most. Friends who once supported him grew distant, sensing something was wrong but unable to understand. His family worried but felt helpless. The loneliness grew, and with a deadly underground world, the millions he made didn't just buy luxury, they bought risk, fear and a life on the edge. The secret behind his success was no longer safe, and the walls were closing in. The choices he made would soon bring consequences that no amount of fame or fortune could protect him from. Betrayal came like a sudden storm, breaking the fragile balance Leo had maintained for so long. Among those he trusted most, someone had turned against him, a close ally who had quietly started cooperating with law enforcement. This betrayal shattered the dangerous world Leo was part of, and set in motion a chain of events that would change everything. The network that once felt invincible suddenly seemed vulnerable, and Leo found himself at the center of a police operation that threatened to expose his darkest secret. For months, this informant had been feeding information to the authorities, detailing shipments, contacts, and meeting locations. The evidence was mounting quietly behind closed doors, away from the glare of stadium lights and media cameras. While Leo was focused on the next match, law enforcement was preparing a major crackdown, aiming to dismantle the entire cocaine empire. The betrayal was a turning point, a warning that no one was untouchable, and even the brightest star could fall. The night of the raid was chaotic. Police stormed safe houses, intercepted shipments, and arrested key figures within the network. Leo's name was among the most wanted, though he was not immediately caught. For a moment, it seemed like he had escaped the worst of the storm, but the pressure only increased. Friends and associates disappeared or went silent, leaving Leo isolated. The world he had built was crumbling, and he could no longer trust anyone. The betrayal exposed how fragile the criminal operation really was. Behind the scenes, alliances shattered, and paranoia spread like wildfire. Every meeting became a test of loyalty, and fear gripped the network. Leo's closest confidants began to distance themselves, worried about their own survival. The powerful empire he helped create was now a house of cards, ready to collapse with the slightest push. The football community was stunned. Rumors about Leo's involvement with drugs had circulated for years, but now they were confirmed with arrests and police statements. Fans felt betrayed, and media outlets sensationalized the scandal. The young star who had once inspired hope was now a symbol of corruption and danger. His rise to fame, which seemed like a story of talent and hard work, was revealed to be fueled by secrets and crime. For Leo, the betrayal was more than just a risk of arrest. It was a personal blow. He had counted on loyalty from those around him, believing that the network was a brotherhood that would protect him. Instead, he was left exposed and vulnerable. The man he trusted to keep his secrets was the very person who handed him over to the authorities. This realization crushed him, and the life he once controlled slipped further out of his grasp. Despite the chaos, Leo knew the worst was yet to come. Investigations were intensifying, and the web of evidence was growing. Law enforcement was closing in on every corner of his life, connecting his football career with the drug empire. The walls were closing in, and there was no clear way out. Each day brought new threats, from police, from rivals, and from the people who once called themselves friends. The betrayal also revealed the depth of corruption tied to Leo's secret life. It wasn't just about drugs, it involved money laundering, bribery, and a network of people willing to protect the operation at any cost. The scandal exposed how the allure of fame and fortune had blinded many, allowing the criminal enterprise to thrive under the radar. The truth was more complicated and darker than anyone had imagined. As Leo faced the consequences of betrayal, he was forced to confront the reality of his choice. His dreams of glory were gone, replaced by a harsh fight for survival. The rise and fall of the football star was no longer just a story about sport. It was a cautionary tale about the cost of secrets, trust, and the dangerous paths some take to chase success. The crackdown came fast and hard. In the early hours of a cold morning, law enforcement descended on multiple locations connected to Leo and his criminal network. The news spread like wildfire: raids at safe houses, seizures of large quantities of cocaine, and dozens of arrests. The football world was stunned. Their rising star, once celebrated for his talent and charisma, was now at the center of one of the biggest drug busts the city had ever seen. The media frenzy that followed was relentless. Headlines screamed betrayal and scandal. Television channels replayed highlights of Leo's best goals, alongside images of police handcuffs and court documents. Fans struggled to reconcile the athlete they cheered for with the man accused of running a multi-million-dollar cocaine empire. Clubs distanced themselves quickly, and sponsors dropped their support, afraid of being linked to the growing controversy. Leo's career, once full of promise, was on the brink of collapse. Behind the public chaos, the legal battle was just beginning. Leo was arrested and charged with multiple offenses, including drug trafficking, money laundering, and conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming: phone records, intercepted messages, and testimony from former associates painted a detailed picture of his involvement. Despite his claims of innocence, the weight of proof was heavy. Every goal scored, every trophy won, was now overshadowed by the crimes he was accused of committing. The football community was divided. Some refused to believe Leo was guilty, arguing that he was a victim caught in a trap. Others saw the case as a clear example of how the sport could be corrupted by criminal influence. The scandal sparked debates about the responsibility of clubs and leagues to monitor their players, and about the dangers young athletes face when tempted by easy money. Leo's story became a cautionary tale, warning others about the cost of secret lives. Meanwhile, Leo's personal life fell apart. His family was devastated, caught between loyalty and disappointment. Friends distanced themselves, unwilling to be dragged into the scandal. The loneliness of prison awaited him, a stark contrast to the cheers of the stadium. The dreams he had chased since childhood were now reduced to memories, blurred by regret and fear. The man who once held so much promise was facing the harsh reality of justice. The trial uncovered more than just Leo's crimes. It exposed a vast network of corruption that extended beyond the drug trade. Bribes had been paid to keep investigations quiet, and some officials were implicated in protecting the operation. The case shook the foundations of the city's institutions, forcing a reckoning that went far beyond one player's downfall. The football world was forced to confront uncomfortable truths about money, power and crime. Despite the overwhelming evidence, Leo's defense team fought hard. They argued that he was manipulated by those around him, and that his football career was used as a cover without his full knowledge. The courtroom became a battleground where truth, deception and desperation clashed. The public watched closely, torn between hope for redemption and demand for justice. As the trial dragged on, the impact of the scandal continued to ripple. Clubs reviewed their policies, and anti-corruption measures were introduced across the league. Young players were warned about the dangers lurking off the field, and the story of Leo became a permanent reminder of how dreams could be destroyed by dangerous choices. The fall from grace was complete, but the lessons learned echoed loudly throughout the sport. As the trial dragged on, the public's fascination with Leo's story only deepened. Every detail that emerged from the courtroom seemed to peel back another layer of the mystery behind his double life. The contrast between the athlete adored by fans and the man entangled in a dangerous drug empire was stark and shocking. Reporters uncovered more connections, tracing the flow of money and drugs through a network that went far beyond what anyone had imagined. Inside the courtroom, the tension was palpable. Leo appeared worn down, his confidence shaken by the weight of the accusations and the relentless pressure. His defense lawyers worked tirelessly, presenting evidence to cast doubt on his knowledge of the full extent of the operation. They argued that Leo had been used as a pawn by more experienced criminals, manipulated into running errands without understanding the bigger picture. But the prosecution countered with a detailed timeline, showing how Leo's involvement grew over time, suggesting he was far from an innocent bystander. Outside, public opinion was divided. Some still held onto the image of the young football star who had fallen victim to his surroundings, while others saw the scandal as proof that the world of professional sports was vulnerable to corruption and crime. Discussions in sports clubs, schools and homes focused on how ambition and temptation could lead even the brightest talents down a dangerous path. Leo's name became synonymous with the dark side of fame and success. The investigation also revealed how deeply entrenched the drug empire had become within the city's fabric. Money laundering schemes disguised illegal profits as legitimate business, involving restaurants, real estate, and even charitable foundations. The network's reach extended to officials who turned a blind eye or actively participated in protecting the operation. The scandal wasn't just about one man, it was a reflection of a system that allowed such corruption to flourish in the shadow. Amidst the growing evidence, new testimonies shocked everyone involved. Former partners in the drug trade, facing their own charges, began to cooperate with authorities. They painted a picture of a ruthless and sophisticated operation, with Leo playing a significant role beyond just delivery. These witnesses described meetings where he negotiated deals, coordinated shipments, and made decisions that showed a deeper involvement than previously admitted. Leo's personal life continued to unravel. His family struggled with the public scrutiny and the stigma attached to his name. Friends who had once been close disappeared, unwilling to be connected to the scandal. The isolation was complete, and the man who had once dreamed of fame and glory found himself trapped by the consequences of his choices. The weight of guilt and regret became a constant burden. Despite all this,
Some still believed there was more to the story, questions about who really controlled the empire, and whether Leo had been forced into a corner by powerful figures above him. Rumors circulated about secret deals and hidden players who used Leo as a scapegoat to protect themselves. The truth seemed to slip further away with every new revelation, making it clear that this story was far more complex than a simple rise and fall. As the trial neared its conclusion, the tension reached its peak. The courtroom was filled with anticipation, and the city waited for justice to be served. Leo's fate would determine not only his future but also send a message to others tempted by the dangerous allure of money and power. The football star's journey, from a promising talent to a criminal defendant, had become a cautionary tale about the cost of secrets and the price of ambition. The courtroom was tense as the final arguments began. Months of testimonies, evidence and investigations had brought the truth closer, but the question remained, what would justice look like for Leo? For many, the trial was more than just about one man. It was a test of the system's ability to confront corruption, hidden beneath the glamour of professional sports. Leo's defense team worked to humanize him, painting a picture of a young man overwhelmed by the forces around him. They argued that Leo was caught in a trap, used by criminals who exploited his ambition and trust. They highlighted his athletic achievements and charitable work, trying to remind the court and public that he was more than the accusation. But the prosecution's case was strong, emphasizing the evidence that showed his growing involvement and responsibility within the drug empire. As the judge listened, the courtroom felt the weight of the moment. The evidence was compelling: phone records, intercepted conversations, financial trails, and witness testimonies, all pointed to Leo's active role. Yet the defense's plea for mercy and understanding resonated with some, highlighting the complexity of the situation. The case was not black and white, it was filled with shades of gray that reflected the difficult choices people make when caught between dreams and survival. Outside the courtroom, reactions were mixed. Some fans held vigil, hoping for a chance at redemption for their fallen star. Others felt justice had to be served to protect the integrity of the sport and society. The scandal had shaken the community, sparking debates about how young athletes are supported and the dangers they face when tempted by easy money and power. Leo's story became a powerful example of how ambition could lead to both greatness and destruction. The judge's verdict was expected but no less shocking. Leo was found guilty on multiple charges, including drug trafficking and money laundering. The sentence was severe: years behind bars and a lifetime scarred by the decisions he made. The football star's dreams were shattered, replaced by a harsh reality far from the cheering crowds and bright stadium lights. As Leo was led away, the silence was deafening. His fall from grace was complete, a tragic end to a story that had captivated a nation. But the trial had done more than punish one man. It had exposed the hidden dangers lurking beneath the surface of fame and fortune. It forced clubs, leagues and communities to confront uncomfortable truths and take steps to prevent similar tragedies. The aftermath rippled through the city. New policies were introduced to monitor athletes and prevent corruption. Support systems for young players were strengthened to help them resist the lure of easy money and protect their futures. The scandal became a turning point, a lesson etched deeply into the culture of sport and society alike. Despite the harsh sentence, some saw hope in Leo's story. His case sparked conversations about redemption and the possibility.
The prison walls were a harsh new reality for Leo. Gone were the bright stadium lights and roaring crowds. Instead, he faced cold cells, unrelenting isolation, and the constant threat of violence. His days were spent navigating a world that was unforgiving and brutal, a far cry from the glory he once knew. The transition from celebrated athlete to inmate was jarring, filled with moments of deep regret and reflection. In prison, Leo encountered people from all walks of life, many who had made mistakes, some dangerous, others simply victims of circumstance. For the first time, he saw the full scope of the criminal world he had become part of. The empire he helped build was now broken, scattered by arrests and betrayals, and he was left to bear the consequences. The weight of his actions pressed down on him, and the reality of his sentence made the future feel uncertain and bleak. Leo's football skills, once his pride and identity, offered little comfort behind bars. The physical training and camaraderie of the team were gone, replaced by confinement and monotony. Still, he found moments to reflect on what led him here. The dreams that fueled his passion now felt distant, overshadowed by the choices that had betrayed those hopes. He grappled with guilt, not just for himself, but for those who had believed in him and were now caught in the fallout. Despite the grim surroundings, Leo tried to hold on to some sense of purpose. He sought ways to rebuild himself mentally, attending prison programs focused on rehabilitation and education. These efforts were small steps, but they represented a chance to reclaim some control over his life. For Leo, the fight was no longer on the football field but within himself, to confront the mistakes, to learn and perhaps one day, to find a way back. The prison environment was also a test of Leo's resilience. Rival inmates were quick to challenge his status, some seeing him as a symbol of downfall or betrayal. He had to adapt quickly, learning to navigate the harsh social codes and dangers that came with incarceration. The fear and uncertainty were constant companions, reminding him that his past had consequences far beyond the courtroom. Outside the prison walls, the world continued to change. Leo's scandal had sparked reforms in the football community, with new programs designed to protect young players from the